Honeymoon hotspot workers, what are your best and worst stories regarding newlyweds? In high school I lived in a tourist town and worked at a video store. One night a Mennonite couple came in and mentioned they were on their honeymoon. They rented in of Green Gables. I frequent a natural hot springs in Alaska that has a high influx of Asian tourists and newlyweds during wintertime. The hot springs create huge steam clouds that make the visibility very low while wading in the waist-high water. Apparently, the newlyweds from Japan, I think, believe that consummating their marriage under the northern lights will give them a male child. So, they go to the hot springs in the middle of winter when it's dark outside and have sex in the water. It's really weird to be there, wading around, and accidentally run into a couple of mating Asians in the water. Edit. Aurora Bone Rallis. Just thought of that. Edit 2. I had no idea that so many Fabanksons were on Reddit. Yes. It's Chena Hot Springs. I live in Las Vegas. And I used to work in one of the major casinos on the strip. One night in one of our clubs during a wedding reception, one of my employees let me know that he had heard multiple people in a bathroom stall. The stalls had full doors so you couldn't see feet, but you could definitely hear some debauchery going on. I called security and they asked the people to open the door. So, out comes a groomsman, followed by the bride, followed by the best man, followed by the groom, all half naked. They proceed to go right back to the reception like nothing ever happened. I'm the evening maintenance at a resort and we get a call that a room has a light bulb out. Cool, something to do. So I hop on my 1-speed golf cart and make way to the room with light bulb in hand. I arrive to said room and I knock on the door and announce maintenance. I hear a man say come in. So I grab my key card, swipe myself in. Lo and behold, the hairiest Russian dude and his smoking hot wife jump from the bed, buttoning up their drawers wide-eyed as deer in the headlights. I 180. Tractor beamed my eyeballs to the floor, apologized and waited outside of the door. Wary the Russian opens the door and instead of going in to change the bulb I said here you go, just handed it to him and hightailed it out of there. After long thought I came to the conclusion he had said coming, but I misheard behind all of his chest hair and his accent. Sad alert. There was an anniversary at the lodge that I worked at for the couple's 50th. They had their whole family staying there for the big event. After the huge party, the not so newlywed bride had a heart attack and died mid-sex. Huge bummer for the husband, but maybe the best way to go. A couple came into my camera shop during the old days of film and explained that they were honeymooning and were concerned that their roll of pictures of the honeymoon just kept going for some reason, like way past the 36 frames. When I told them there was no film in the camera, the honeymoon ended right there for the poor bastard husband whose job it was to load the camera. If looks could kill. This probably doesn't count. I worked at a goddamn Dairy Queen. Hotspot? I think not. Anyway, this couple comes up to the counter, gushing and talking about how they just got married X days ago. They were clearly looking for someone to comp their first shared blizzard. Double quote. What they did not realize was that I knew the girl involved from a church related thing. No less. The relationship was just distant enough so that she didn't recognize me without context. Clearly, they were dating or friends or something who decided to try to get free ice cream. If she'd truly been engaged, I wouldn't have known. Anyway, I said in my sweetest voice, sure, name of girl, and congrats. Double quote. Her face was priceless both at the time and later when I saw her among church people. Totally worth the money I had to eat for the blizzard. The honeymoon suites were always the worst. There was never a real best. I guess the best of the worst was the room with the chocolate. The shower and jacuzzi were covered in it. Cleaning it was awful, but the chocolate butt print impossibly high up on the shower wall was pretty impressive. Not quite honeymoon related, but I work at a high-end hotel chain, and during the reception, I delivered cake, presents, champagne and robes to the bridal suite, having my own key and not expecting anyone in the room. I let myself in to find the mother of the groom and a groomsman having a little bit of fun on their own. Fair to say I walked out quite quickly. A Christian couple I know had never had sex before their wedding night. The guy wanted to break the ice, so he got naked while his bride was in the suite bathroom on their honeymoon. He spread eagle and aimed his butt towards the bathroom door. His bride comes out and he rips a fart. But she came out. He shit the bed and she locked herself in the bathroom for 7 hours crying. They're fine now, but she wanted a divorce that night. Okay, so I work at a high-end all-inclusive hotel in SoCal. Honeymooners often come here and for some reason she always seems to get really weird. Possibly because I know one of my co-workers sells Molly, so one night at like 3 AM we get a request for room service and they want mustard, ketchup and a bun. So to get this straight, they did not ask for a hot dog. Being that we are all about customer service, I go into the kitchen and get all of the items and bring it up to the room. I knock once. No answer. Twice. No answer. Then finally after the third knock I get an answer. I give them their mustard, ketchup and bun on the platter and the F-king dude rips off the top of it, grabs the bun, whips out his DCK and sticks it right in it. The new wife grabs the ketchup and mustard and dumps it all over it. They both start hysterically laughing and close the door. I was at a loss of words for hours, so I guess they got me pretty good. I worked at a resort on Vancouver Island. We also rented houses to families. This one couple on their honeymoon rented a 3-story house in the summer. They looked like a normal pair of people, but I was wrong. Checking the house a week later to make sure they left. The woman had stuck used tampons in the drains and smeared blood on the walls. There were holes in every door and most walls. TV was smashed. Everything went wrong. Edit. Wow, this is my biggest comment yet. Please don't gild me, I use mobile, it's a waste. Edit. Will shit. I thought 600 upvotes was good. 980 and rising. Yay. A while back in the long ago, I work at a 4-star hotel. A couple came in for their honeymoon, but they forgot to bring in protection and they didn't have any in their rooms, and the public toilet on the first floor was out. So the guy asked me in an HRNY voice where he could procure himself some contraception. I told him I would get him some. I went to the staff bathroom, got 4 for $2. Yes, we get them cheaper, and brought them to him. He was so glad he gave me $100 for tip. Edit. Lol, getting gold for this. It wasn't anything beyond what was my responsibility at the hotel at the time. Also, yes, we do have condoms dispensers and nice hotel where I'm from. Might be some sort of regulation from the city or whatever, and they are very nice looking with expensive preservatives in them. And by HRNY voice I meant you could feel the sexual tension in it. Now excuse me while I go hang in our lounge. Capital P. Don't know why, but the maid decided to bust in 2 hours before checkout. Me and the woman were mid-doggy style and she, not the maid, shot under the blanket so fast I was literally there with my DCK in hand. Edit. Being young and in love and very horny. All caution is thrown to the wind in regards to locking the door when it's your first weekend to go crazy together completely alone. Also edit on the pronoun. I used to work at a Hilton hotel near Disney, and there was a newlywed couple that had come down from their room and said they had just gotten married and they were looking for the nearest topless bar. I'm confused as to how forward they were and why they would want to spend their wedding night at a topless bar. So I directed them down a sleazy part of town and told them there were plenty down a specific road. Later, I was so shocked I told my co-worker what had just happened and what they were looking for. He then called me an idiot and said they probably asked for a tapas bar. Well, shit. That was the first time I had heard of said place and never knew they existed or were called that. I work at a hotel restaurant. One day we hosted a wedding reception for a young couple who paid for an open bar. The party was a blast. People got wasted and had tons of fun. Around 2 AM the bride and groom and their closest friends finally left the restaurant to go back to their room. Apparently they decided to all hang out in a room for a while and continue the party. From what I heard, at some point the maid of honor called the bride a lesbian, and the groom socked said maid in the face. She ran, screaming, to the front desk and called the police. The groom was arrested and taken to jail on his wedding night for assaulting the maid of honor. 1 year later, the couple returned to the restaurant for their anniversary. They were super cool and seemed really happy. I work at a high-end couples retreat which honeymooners often come to. I guess you would say it's a more on the best side of the stories, as every time this certain couple would come to breakfast dinner, the quite attractive girl would be always wearing see-through tops with no bra. And when I took food to their rooms on multiple occasions, the woman would open the door in her underwear or be naked under the covers in her bed. I've had a few drunken honeymooners invite me back to their room for drinks, but I've never taken them up on the offer. I like to keep my job, haha. I don't work at a honeymoon hotspot, but over winter break I went on a cruise. My cousins and I had met this couple on the cruise that were on their honeymoon. The husband was pretty chill, and the wife seemed really nice too. I think they were in their 20s. He was like 27, and she 24. I was drunk the whole cruise, so I may be wrong. Well, anyway, we had hung out with them just about every night, partying and drinking at the bar. Well, on the last night my oldest cousin went to bed early, and it was just I and my other cousin. It was around 2 in the morning and we were just chill in bed, all drunk, enjoying food, when all of a sudden she comes stumbling into the restaurant and sat with us. She told us her husband went to bed and she was lonely. We openly invited her to join us, and that's when she completely opened up. She was saying how HRNY she was, and how she had been keeping her eye on us. We thought she was joking, but then she turned and said that if she wasn't recently married, she would have loved to have sex with my cousin and I. We didn't know what to do, so we just walked her to her room and said goodnight to her. But I really have felt bad for her husband. She tried to apologize to us the next day, but my cousin got mad and told her she better get her act together. My cousin is 23 and I'm 20 BTW. One time in the Lax airport, I saw a couple vehemently arguing and making accusations of fault about seat changes, flight plans, etc., all the way up to the boarding pass counter. Then, when they got up to the counter, they explained politely and cheerfully to the flight attendant that they were on their way to their honeymoon and needed to check their seats. I work as a manager for a resort on a Pacific island. I can't say which because it would be too identifying. Anyways, this man turns up out of the blue. Seemed a bit of a downer, but boy did he know his way around a cocktail bar. So I hired him as a bartender. And what a mistake that was. Not only had he banged half the waitresses within a month, but he'd also banged a couple newlywed brides on their honeymoons. How do you do that? Then one day, he disappeared the same way he showed up. Out of the blue. Maybe it had something to do with that guy with the seaplane. I was in Mexico with my mother and sister. As we were walking down an outdoor path in the resort, we saw a young girl crying and her boyfriend walking behind her frantic. They were both covered in cuts and bruises, surrounded by security and medical, and of course on their honeymoon. I asked one of the staff what happened. The couple was having sex on their balcony and fell off. Apparently not too high off the ground, but height enough to be beaten and shook up. TLDR, don't have sex on a balcony. Worked for a Canadian Christian summer camp called Camp Sagitaur. I was a cabin leader or a glorified babysitter. We had a night where the cabins mixed into co-ed for a Bible study night, then a night under the stars. Kids fucking everywhere. These sweet little angels were HRNY fuckers. Kids F-king on the playscape, water trampoline, fields, everywhere. Nobody tried to hide it. Maybe 15 couples fucking. Edit. Just realized my username does not help the authenticity of this story. When I was about 10, my family was in Nick for vacation and we were walking down the sidewalk when we saw a man in a tux and a woman in a wedding dress arguing. When we stopped at the crosswalk, I overheard their argument and the woman took off her ring and yelled at the guy, "Wheel, why don't I just give that kid my ring if it doesn't mean shit to you?" and pointed at me. The man quickly tried to hush her, but it didn't work as she started to yell louder. We got the hell out of there. I worked at an all-inclusive honeymoon resort for gay autistic Jewish coal miners. It was truly a ridiculous experience. I live on Maui and worked for a while at Enterprise, car rental. Once I already had a new job lined up. I could get away with anything. This newlywed couple had an economy car reservation and wanted to upgrade to a Mustang convertible. It was supposed to be an extra $100 per day, which the guy could obviously not afford based on the look on his face when I told him. But I gave it to them anyway for free because there was sand in the front seat that I didn't feel like vacuuming. They jumped up and down and hugged me and said I made their honeymoon. The feels. Not honeymoon. But I do work at a resort. Approach the cabin door. Knock 3 times. Housekeeping. Didn't get any sort of reply, so I opened the door and walked into 2 people having sex with ball gags in their mouths. Just doggy style. Not even on the bed. Down on the floor. Getting their liquid children all over the place. Edit. For your information, I did not say I clean and proceed to lemon pledge the windows. Got married in Hawaii. Staying at a swanky resort. Late one afternoon my wife was getting out of the shower. And I had boxes on lying in bed after a long day at the beach. When out of nowhere I hear the front door opening up. I thought it was my wife. And she thought it was me. But in walks a couple with luggage and key card in their hand asking what we are doing in their room. Needless to say, we were upgraded to an oceanfront suite for the rest of our stay due to the screw up at the front desk. We were also comped meals for the rest of our stay. And 1/2 hour bill was also comped. TLNDR. Strange couple walks into my hotel room. Hotel pays dilly for it lol. Edit. Spelling. I'm a wedding photographer and a groom. Recently returned from honeymoon told me the story of how he got his $15,000 honeymoon free of charge. He and his brand new lady wife had just checked into the honeymoon suite of a palatial island paradise after a long flight from London. Having showered after their journey they retired to the bed to celebrate their new union. Once the throes of passion had subsided, the groom tells me he saw the drapes by the window move a little and jumping up, pulled them aside to see a bellhop concealed there, and, you guessed it, having a bit of a twang on the ol' 1-string bass. Naturally they complained and the manager, seeking to minimize the damage, fired the employee on the spot and basically traded the full stay in return for them taking the incident no further. I had just finished teaching newlyweds how to ballroom dance. I saw the gent had a hickey on his neck so made a joke about it. Bad move. They had a fight and he stormed off leaving her crumpled in a heap on the dance floor. I tried to console her the best I could but it was F-kid. He was way out of his league anyway. One other shitty note I remember was that the girl I had for my next lesson saw the whole thing, everybody did, and was tapping her watch at me. I was serving at a wedding a few years ago that probably fits in the most embarrassing category. It was the part of the reception where everyone gives a speech or a quick toast. When we weren't serving we were expected to line up a specific way and I'm standing there facing the bridal party from across the room. The bride's mother gets up and does this very touching speech on how she wished grandma had been able to see it and what a beautiful bride her daughter was. Then she pulls out this box and says she has something from grandma. She pulls out this old doll. The kind with the huge fluffy dress that people use to set on the bed as decoration. She hands it up to the bride who starts telling her guests how she's always loved this doll since she was a kid and she wondered what happened to it after grandma died. So the photographer comes up to get a picture of her with the doll and right as she poses this little silver ball on a cord falls out of the bottom of the doll. At first I didn't know what it was but the bride picked it up to look and immediately freaked and dropped it which set the crowd off. One of my co-workers had to explain to me it was a vibrating egg, sex toy, and it was probably grandma's. To this day I wonder what kind of photos, if any, the photographer caught at that moment. I used to be a bouncer at a nightclub that was part of a major hotel in San Francisco. People would get married and have their reception in the hotel and then head to the club after. One night a couple 2 hours fresh from the altar and their party was in the club. They are sloshed. But the bride is beyond drunk and causing problems, stumbling into people, being too loud and trying to cross a VIP rope that I'm guarding. Well, she gets across the rope and while I'm trying to persuade to go back to the other side she starts grinding on me and saying, "You think you can handle me?" Her husband is about 3 feet away with his jaw on the floor. I asked him to control his wife and he snapped out of his shock. He grabbed her wrist and dragged her out of the club swearing up a storm. I still feel bad for the guy. I worked for a timeshare company as a supervisor over the phone, so I got all the escalated calls for those upset owners for whatever reason. And there was this couple that were spending their honeymoon in Aruba. They had it all planned out. They were going to take a nice walk along the beach under the moonlight and go back and just get freaky. Well, the time of year that they got married in happened to be a very humid time. So there's a lot of bugs out. I get the call from the bride. She's irate. Goes straight to the supervisor. She called in and blamed the timeshare company for the fact that she wasn't able to get naked in front of her new husband and have sex with him so that they could convenience their first child together. All because she happened to get some mosquito bites and she was embarrassed to get naked in front of him because of those bites. And since the beach was on the resort's property, it was the hotel's fault that she couldn't get naked and get pregnant. Edit. I'm leaving my typo because you guys made me smile. Close bracket. Bartended at this upscale lodge in Texas. Catered mostly to oil money and DFW area rich people. This lady came in. Probably 35ish and decent looking with a nice body. Not quite a newlywed. But was married 6 months earlier. Then he cheated and she left him, about 4 martinis and she started spilling her guts. She said they had only had sex maybe 10 times as a married couple and she misses the feel of a man, etc. Really putting it on thick that she needed some. So I playfully bartender flirted with her. Gave her a free drink. Paid good attention, etc. It got to be about midnight, bar closed at 12, and she asked if I could have a drink in her room with her when I got out. I said I couldn't do that. Place had very strict rules and I was making decent money. After a few minutes I decided that the story might be worth it and I told her that if she ordered room service I could deliver it in a few minutes. There was an end of night walk that had to be done that takes about 20-30 minutes. Which I figured I could just not do and I could help out this divorcee. She drunkenly nodded and walked away. After about 15 minutes we got the order for strawberries to her room. I prepped them and got ready to go. Told manager I was going to do the night walk as well. Probably 15 minutes had gone by and I got to her door. It was slightly open. I knocked and walked in. There she was on the bed with another guy, really fat hotel guest she must have picked up, going down on her and she was no joke slapping his head yelling at him tongue FCK me harder while he was jerking himself off. Neither one noticed me at all. Set down the strawberries and walked out. One time we had a couple who had just gotten married spend their wedding night with us before they were to fly out the next day for their honeymoon. We made sure the room was perfect. Even comping them some champagne. Then, at about 1:00 AM, we got several complaints from the surrounding rooms that they were screaming at each other. Not ecstatic. Yay. Baby. Kind of screams. More like yay. Go ahead and cry. You fucking bitch. Kind of screams. So, our protocol in such a situation is to call the cops for a domestic dispute. Turns out the guy had punched through our wall. He was arrested. And she spent her wedding night alone. Great foundation for a marriage. Not really a honeymoon story but I thought I'd share. I used to work at a big hotel and one week we had a gay wedding. The ceremony reception went well with about 60 people in attendance. For the night the couple had booked one of the bigger rooms, expecting about 200 people. So we set up all the tables buffet and the DJ sets up all prepared for what we expected to be a massive night. Cut to 11 PM. I walk into this big room to find about 25 people and one of the grooms crying onto the other. Unfortunately they had booked their wedding the same weekend as our city's gay pride festival. No one has shown up to the night party and half the people from the day had left to attend the festival. We felt so bad for them. He was just crying all night. Poor guys. We rent out holiday homes on a weekly basis. That Saturday, the family that rented one of them didn't show up, though they paid the €3,000 up front. No phone call or message to warn us of any delay. We tried calling them. No reply. In the end we concluded they must have had an accident on the way. 2 days and various attempts at contact from us later, I get a very embarrassed phone call. It turns out they were at their own wedding feast when they were supposed to arrive. In their home country 1,000 kilometers from there. They passed out at 5 AM. Slept through the next day and only found our messages the following evening. The whole party just assumed someone else had told us they planned to arrive 2 days too late. I'm glad they turned out to be just wed rather than dead. But who the FCK goes on honeymoon together with their parents and in-laws? My brother used to work at a big restaurant resort that would often do weddings. One night they were hosting a large dinner party for all the guests after the wedding earlier that day. Of course at that point everyone was pretty wasted, so the groom ended up getting into a fight with one of the bride's distant uncles. I kid you not. The uncle ended up biting off the groom's finger and swallowing it so he couldn't reattach it. Everyone was freaking out and the groomsmen ended up beating up the uncle until he puked back out the severed finger. My first marriage was back in 1987. We were both 20. Barely enough money for food and rent. You know the drill. We went on a honeymoon to a resort location nearby in a hotel. They gave us a room right next to the door leading to the indoor pool area. We checked into our room and I did the whole carry over the threshold thing and we got busy pretty fast. Clothes piled on floor and us naked going at it, athletic sweaty sex. Then I heard a noise and looked toward the door and I see a couple of families staring into our open door that I forgot to even close. We went to the Caribbean for our honeymoon. It was awesome. We want to go back. Our villa had a hammock strung between the handrails. We were laying in the hammock together reading books. There was a tropical storm for the first couple days. The damn thing broke and dropped us on the ground. We had to go in and tell the front desk reception that it was broken and ask that it be fixed. With the look they gave us, I'm absolutely positive they did not believe we were just laying in it reading a book. My wife kept turning red. I was having a hard time not laughing. I used to work at a large hotel where weddings receptions would be held on a regular basis. One night, after a wedding, the newlywed couple is in their suite and complaints start coming in about a fight in their room. Turns out, they got into it with each other and the new wife beat up her new husband. The cops ended up taking her to jail. I guess the new husband was fapping that night. I manage a small fancy B&B in New England. While the newlyweds partied in the Red Room, their friends had the run of the place. Around 1 AM I get a knock on my door by the drunkest fool, asking if I have any more booze. This, after explaining that I do not drink, several times earlier in the evening. In the morning they all left without getting breakfast, rushing out as fast as possible. In a pile on the Red Room bathroom floor were about 6 towels. Every one of them was sopping with piss. Not an employee of a hotel or anything but a volunteer firefighter EMT. One time, a honeymooner couple, this is common. I live right outside the city in a very artsy-fartsy famous town, had been drinking exuberantly and had been experimenting with drugs. This lead to getting naked in public, which lead to sexual acts in public, which were interrupted by the bloody screams of the man who was screaming and howling in pain that his flesh was on fire. He rolled around on the floor scratching at his ass and sack begging for us to pour water on him. Not a hotspot worker, but I did have a ship cabin next to a couple that was on their honeymoon, coincidentally. We were on ours as well. The first 2 days went fine enough. I suppose. They, as expected, were inseparable. Sometime on day 3 though, I guess they got into a fight and proceeded to continue their fight very loudly for the next day. By day 5, he was in a different cabin. On the last night, they were back to having quiet sex and watching DVDs. I don't know if that boded well for their relationship, but best of luck to Tiffany and Blake. I used to be an EMT in my hometown, and one even we had a call about a hit and run at the local hotel. We get on scene to find two belligerently drunk patients. One with a messed up leg and the other one couldn't feel anything below his neck. Turns out it was the groom's father and the groom of a wedding party who were trying to stop a friend of theirs from driving home drunk. We had to call a second ambulance and to take the father. And all the way to the hospital we heard nothing from the groom except how he was going to kick our asses. They were both really intoxicated. The father had a broken femur and had to get his leg amputated. And the groom is now a quadriplegic basically because they were trying to help a drunk friend. That was by far the saddest thing I had to deal with while I was an EMT. I had to deal with people dying unexpectedly. But this was so much worse. Because this was the night of their wedding. Hell, they were still in their tuxedos. I got one. I wasn't there, but my wife, her cousin, was the bride. So the groom's brother was middle-aged and autistic. It was also known to a few insiders that in the past he had been in trouble of inoperative interaction with children. The groom told the bride this in privacy a while ago, but of course she relayed this to her entire family over time so everyone knew. So the big day comes and a few drinks and the brother gets a bit too friendly with a few of the family children. Nothing horrific. Just making the kids feel uncomfortable. Touching of the shoulder. I am not sure what he did, but a gasket broke with one of the kids' dads and a fight broke out. Both families are completely divided, one side stating that the guy is a changed man and was just being friendly. The other that the creep shouldn't be allowed near children. Wedding ends and is a disaster. I live in one of the East Coast's most sought after wedding destination. A couple years ago a couple rented a moped, which, as locals know, on an island that's basically 90% sand, is a terrible idea. Despite this, people rent many mopeds and there is always at least one fatality a summer. They were riding on one of our main cross-island stretches and decided to kiss while riding. They veered off the road and slammed into a telephone pole. The newlywed wife, who had just received her PhD, was driving and her husband's weight crushed her against the pole, killing her instantly. The husband is in a persistent vegetative state for what will probably be the rest of his life. So sad. They were just beginning what would be a beautiful life and just like that, gone. I was working as a scuba instructor at a Caribbean honeymoon hotspot. I invited the newlywed couple for a scuba, but the husband says no, but encourages his wife to go along. It is like the story of the hippo. Just be happy to be the hippo. Not me. A friend. And he wasn't the worker but would have made for a shitty start to someone's day. On his honeymoon in Italy, and decided to drink from a fountain. Later that night, early next morning, explosive shits all through the hotel bed. Woke up covered in his own filth. Whiffy did the good deed and bundled up the filth-ridden sheets into a foul heap in the middle of the bed. Left a €5 note atop the heap and they both crept out of the hotel for the day. I went to a wedding that was very nice. Bride looked beautiful, venue was nice. Midway through the evening the bride's stepmother did this weird jig dance. Thought maybe too much alcohol. Then a speech time. The father of the bride starts looking for his speech, makes a show of it, then goes, oh there it is. In walks a stripper in lingerie with a rolled up speech in her hands, holds her while he gives his speech. The bride, to her credit, doesn't get upset, gives her speech, then says, now that's how you give a speech, and hands the microphone back to the father. As a parent now, I can't imagine what sort of an asshole would do that to their daughter. I don't work at a honeymoon location, but I have watched a wedding proposal fail. At a zoo in Australia, a man paid to hold an owl and have the opportunity to propose to his girlfriend. The woman didn't even seem interested in the man, and in the end there was no proposal. The whole thing was incredibly awkward to watch, knowing what was meant to happen. I used to work at an upscale hotel, and one night a guy calls up the front desk and asks how much to buy a lobster. Like a live one. Not cooked. I tell him I'll find out and call him back. I ask the chef and call his room. No answer. Try again. Nothing. I guess in the 10 minutes it took me to call him back, he left the hotel. Went to the market. And bought his own damn lobster. 2 hours later, phone rings. Ever find out about that lobster? Yes sir. It will be $30 to buy outright. Bring it up. I'd f what this guy is doing with these lobsters, but I'm scared. I don't actually work at any honeymoon hotspot, but I am in a choir that occasionally does weddings. We were in Reno for some choir festival and it was the day of our concert, so the entire choir was dressed up in our vests and everything. We were a high school choir for boys and girls, so we were SAB. Anyways, we were walking down the sidewalk and a bride and groom are on the same side as us coming straight at us. The whole choir parted in order to let them though. But we were a pretty big choir, so it almost became a procession for the couple and their friends behind them. One of the guys must have thought so, at least, because he started singing Ave Maria, which is a pretty popular song for weddings. Soon the whole choir was singing as they walked by us. And their friends all started grinning and recording it and taking pictures. The bride and groom seemed really happy at least, and I like to think that we made their wedding that much better. TLDR. My choir crosses paths with a wedding group while at Reno and provides some free singing while they go by. Almost story. My husband and I got married in a historic inn. Very small wedding. We had a suite. And the wedding was held in the parlor. After the ceremony we had about an hour before dinner. So everyone else cleared out and my new husband and I just collapsed on the sofa in our wedding clothes. Exhausted from the nerves and relieved we'd made it through. We were just going to chill until heading over to the restaurant. Suddenly we hear a key in the door and it swings open with no knocking or anything. In come two hotel workers whose task it was to put the room back together. Stuff was moved around for the ceremony before we came back to spend the night. They jumped about a foot when they saw us and looked horrified. They thought, when they saw the 30 or so people leave, that we were among them, and assumed the room was empty. They realized they could have very easily walked in on us consummating the union. I bet they knock in the future. My buddy of many years got married on a Friday. He was 22 at the time, his wife was 20. Both of them were virgins. They were going on their honeymoon on Monday night but spent the first 2 nights at a hotel. We hung out on Monday so I could hear the details of how it was. We kept making jokes about the sex but nothing too raunchy. Finally, when the wife left, he told me the real story. They tried to have sex. He said the first night he spent most of the time aiming and gave up since they were tired. The second night he had better aim, but apparently she was too tight. I'm guessing she was tense, and the third night he finally managed to go all the way, but things ended quickly, if you know what I mean. At this point I am trying my hardest not to laugh cause he was telling me as a friend looking for advice and I did not know what to say other than try harder. After they got back from their honeymoon they both looked really happy and he told me they had no problems doing the deed, a lot from what he told me. I guess a week of practice took care of their issue. I was really happy for him and they're still happily married after 5 years. TLDR. Friend spent first 3 nights of marriage learning how to have sex. Went on honeymoon and became a sex machine. Not one of the workers. But apparently some DCK named Randy banged my then wife while I was out golfing. The lack of comments in this thread is getting me interested. Not a worker, but when my uncle was on his honeymoon in Spain. He came back after 10 days because he missed Indian food. He's still happily married to my aunt, but at the time she was like WTF since they still had 4 days left. I used to work at a Little Caesars. A friend of mine said her sister was coming up for a large order of pizzas. 10 minutes later there she is. In her wedding dress. Getting some hot and sweaties for the reception. It's a white trash feast. Working in a big hotel. We had a honeymoon suite. One day, a small fire broke out in a housekeeping closet on the same floor as the honeymoon suite. Fire alarms and sprinklers go off on that floor. Fire depth responds within just a few minutes. And proceeds to put 10,000 gallons of water on the burning embers. Hey. They use really big hoses. Now we have 6 inches of water on the floor. So we are sloshing around. In the meantime, we are manually checking all rooms to ensure that people are safely evacuated. Not from the fire, it is out. But from the water. Knock on the honeymoon suite door. No answer. Walk back through the living room into the bedroom of the suite. There are the honeymooners going at it full swing. Alarms. Smoke. fire truck, and sprinklers did not slow them down. I made the decision to just allow them to keep on going. I knew that they were safe. Upon departure, they never said a word about the fire. I'm newlywed myself actually. We haven't done the ceremony yet, but we did all the legal stuff, so it's official. The day we got married we went to this beach cafe restaurant, and there I put on her ring that I had been saving up for. It was a pretty empty restaurant that day because of the weather, and I tried to be discreet about it, but the staff noticed anyways. About 30 minutes later the entire staff came out and gave me and my wife this big ice cream cake platter for free and all cheered us. I was beyond surprised, and it was the best service I have ever received. If you're ever in Fukuoka I would recommend Stella Beach Cafe near Fukuma Beach. Close bracket.